Hello. Thanks for coming to my talk. My talk today is about abundance networks, which are basically crypto-enabled resource allocation tools for the 21st century. I'm going to aim for about 20 minutes about abundance networks. And I'd like to start with who am I? So I'm Kevin Owocki. I'm one of the founders of Gitcoin. We just passed about $69 million worth of funding to open source software through 23 grants rounds, all focused on Ethereum public goods. We hit the meme number 69,420,000, and that's through 5.3 million unique donations. And I think that in many ways, my work at Gitcoin is what's informed this talk on abundance networks. I've also written a couple books. Two of the most prominent ones that I want to call out here are Green Pilled: How Crypto Can Regenerate the World, which presents a positive sum vision for blockchain technology, and then On-Chain Capital Allocation Handbooks, which is an approachable guide to funding what matters in the 21st century. The talk today is about abundance networks. So basically, network designed to create more value through collaboration. Basically, it grows stronger the more people participate in shared resources. Think open source software meets positive sum economics, but applied to the rest of the economy. I also recently wrote a book about abundance networks. You can get that at abundancenetworks.xyz. And abundance networks are basically a new construction that allows us to channel resources to different ecosystems using the power of on-chain capital allocation. So basically, capital allocation is a multi-trillion-dollar design space. VCs, governments, NGOs, and DAOs all have to allocate capital to survive and thrive, but it's also a design space where we can start small. Every time you spend money, you are allocating capital. I think the moment of opportunity for abundance networks is that we are going to see lots of changes in the post-AI, post-tokenization internet to how capital is allocated. The internet changed how we move information around, everything that relies on that: social media, politics, entertainment. And I think Web3 and AI are going to change how we move money and value around. And everything that relies on that: investments, charity, infrastructure, crowdfunding, public goods funding, is going to change as a result of this wave of the internet. So basically, using AI and Web3 and all the cool things that they offer to us, we're going to be able to design novel on-chain post-AI capital allocation networks that channel abundance to people all over the world. And the rest of my talk is going to be examples of abundance networks and things that I've learned from those abundance networks. So the first, and the one that I want to start off with, is quadratic funding, which is something that we used at Gitcoin. You can kind of think of it as just a very democratic way of running a crowdfunding campaign, where you've got a matching pool and you're matching contributions from the crowd to the crowd's favorite projects on the basis of the number of supporters of each project, as opposed to the amount that each person has funded. So with quadratic funding, if two projects raise $100 and the first project raises $100 from 100 contributors and the second project raises $100 from one contributor, then the first project gets way more of the matching pool. And so you can see that the more democratically supported a project is, the more supported it'll be with quadratic funding. Case study of this is that during COVID, we ran a quadratic funding round in Boulder, Colorado, that basically channeled $25,000 from the matching pool to everyday businesses that were basically not Web3 businesses. So the novel ground here was that we did this with a fitness studio, with a comic book shop, with a chocolatier, and a yoga shop. And it turns out that quadratic funding and the model that was pioneered in Web3 works totally the same as in the real world. And I think this is a really interesting example of a abundance network that was pioneered in crypto going mainstream. And one of the things that I think is really interesting about quadratic funding is how it's evolved over time. So basically, a lot of these abundance networks, what you'll see with them is an evolution in which we add more complexity over time, and we don't aim for perfection in the initial pilot round, but potential future rounds can increase the value creation of those rounds through iteration and evolving the scope of the software. So iterative evolutionary networks, I think, are really interesting And we've seen a lot of abundance networks that have that trait. Okay, so that's the first abundance network, quadratic funding. Now I'm going to move on to another abundance network, and that's retro funding. So basically, this is a way of funding what matters in ecosystems on the basis of what badge holders, basically experts in these ecosystems, want to see funded with the benefit of hindsight. So you're retroactively funding what matters in these ecosystems with the benefit of hindsight, and badge holders, experts, are making the decisions. Really proud of the Optimism ecosystem and what they've been able to pull off on retro funding for their ecosystem. They've distributed hundreds of millions of dollars in OP, their native token, to open source software, but also other things in that ecosystem. So basically, projects apply for the funding, and then badge holders basically vote on what they want to see funded, and then past contributions to the Optimism ecosystem are funded in this way. So I think that one of the interesting things that I've seen about abundance, the Optimism retro funding, is the move from project-based voting to impact metrics-based voting. So project-based voting has a problem insofar that it's basically badge holders voting on the projects, and sometimes it's hard to know which projects have had the most impact. And so in round 4, basically what Optimism did was focus on impact metrics, which basically changed the scope of voting to be at a higher level. Badge holders could select, I want to vote for projects that have consumed the most block space or have brought the most users on chain. And what I think is really exciting about that is that with just choosing a couple impact metrics, the Optimism badge holders are able to select the votes for hundreds of projects. So basically, the system translates the impact metrics into the project-based votes on the basis of how much each project has hit that metric. So a really interesting evolutionary example of the Optimism ecosystem evolving based off of what they learned in round 3 into round 4. Okay, so we've covered quadratic funding, retro funding. These are both abundance networks that have been pioneered in crypto. And the next one that I want to talk about is guilds. So basically, the most famous example of this is Protocol Guild in the Ethereum ecosystem. They're basically a registry of core protocol developers for the Ethereum ecosystem, consensus layer and execution layer client developers. And basically, they curate a registry called the Protocol Guild, which enables DAOs, L2 ecosystems, L1s, anyone whose work depends on Ethereum, to fund Ethereum core protocol development. So the Protocol Guild is this collective funding mechanism for Ethereum core contributors. Before, there was no way to directly fund the members of the developers who are doing protocol development, but Protocol Guild has made it really easy to just stream money to developers in the Protocol Guild ecosystem, and notable projects like Uniswap, Arbitrum, Lido, ENS, and others have taken the Protocol Guild pledge, a 1% pledge that encourages Ethereum-based projects to allocate 1% of their token supply to Protocol Guild. This is a trend that I think I see in the market called self-governance. So basically, the Protocol Guild is run by core devs, and there's no outside governance of it. So it's built on a trusted domain, mature, high-context developer ecosystem with no external control. The members decide on how their membership is done. It's a self-curated registry. And I think that this creates a credible and stable, long-term, deep trust and a long-term commitment between these ecosystem members. One of the cool things I've seen in market over the last year is this idea of forkability. So basically, people are taking Protocol Guild and launching a dev tooling guild, are launching a guild. And I think that there's an interesting trend of people taking mechanisms that were pioneered for one ecosystem and bringing it to other ecosystems. And that's something that we've seen in quadratic funding and retro funding and in Protocol Guild. And I think we're going to see in all sorts of abundance networks. This is one of the things that's going to distinguish Web3-based networks in that fund what matters from traditional hierarchies, is their forkability and their open sourceness. Okay, we're in the home stretch now. I'm going to go through a couple more examples of abundance networks, and then we will wrap up the talk. Deep funding is a open source dependency funding project that was announced in December 2024. Basically, it's backed by Vitalik Buterin, and it's a way of funding critical but overlooked Ethereum open source infrastructure. Basically, it uses an AI-generated deep graph of 400,000 dependencies to Ethereum clients to guide allocations. So the initial pilot is 250K is at stake, and 170K of it is going to go to open source projects on the basis of their dependency graph of Prismatic and Geth and other execution layer and consensus layer clients. And basically, there's a contest to figure out which dependencies are the most important and where the money should go. And it's leveraging AI in order to determine which dependencies are going to get which amount. So deep funding, I think, is a really interesting experiment because it uses AI as the engine and humans as the steering wheel. So basically, these AI agents make decisions, but the humans in the pilot, basically a spot-checking jury, set the goals with high-quality inputs, and this keeps humans in control while scaling decision-making via AI. So the trend here is avoiding putting AI in charge, creating open markets of AI and AI human solvers. And I think that we're going to see an expanding ecosystem of info finance, basically an ecosystem in which markets and AIs create signals, and not just price signals, but all sorts of information signals about what is valuable. Okay, so we've covered quadratic funding, retro funding, protocol guild, and deep funding. My last abundance network that I want to talk about is going to be commitment pooling. So basically, this is a capital allocation methodology that has existed for tens of thousands of years. It's actually used in Kenya and has been for tens of thousands of years. It's basically a way of allocating capital without currency. So we actually did a pilot of this at a recent DAO camp that I went to, and basically the way it works is that you take a sticky note and you say what your skills are. Say you want to have an hour of Owocki time in order to, maybe I could give you advice on your project. We had someone who said they were giving surf lessons. We had another person who said they were going to give a spinal health workshop. Another person that says they were going to give astrology readings. And basically the sticky notes all being put in this commitment pool allows people to draw on them and to pull out the skills of other people in the group. And so it kind of creates liquidity. And if you're a bunch of strangers, you might feel shy about asking someone for a favor. But when you've put a sticky into the commitment pool and then you're pulling a sticky out, there's sort of like a protocol way of pulling the things out of the pool. And so I think that commitment pooling, that's how we applied it at the DAO camp, but you could easily imagine an example in a more indigenous space in which someone is offering labor on a farm and someone is offering crops and someone is offering coaching of some sort. And so commitment pools are really lindy, meaning that they've been used for tens of thousands of years. And so there's this trend of retrofuturism, basically this idea that we're going to take the peer-to-peer capital allocation and abundance methodologies that have existed in time immemorial, basically since the beginning of humanity, and bring them on-chain. We're rediscovering our ability to coordinate peer-to-peer in the web era because of blockchains. So ancient futures are basically future systems that use ancestral values in modern tools. And I think that commitment pooling, I think, is a really interesting one to end on, because I gave all these futuristic examples: quadratic funding, retro funding, protocol guild, but commitment pooling, I think, is something that has existed for a long time. And so excited to bring that back and to bring that on chain and to practice that more in some of the communities that I'm involved in. Okay, so the book is Abundance Networks.xyz. We have a preview copy that is out now, and I'm excited to show off more ways that Web3 and blockchain can create abundance in humanity's journey into the 21st century. There's lots of ways that we can marry crypto and AI to do cool stuff, and it's been a real pleasure to be at the forefront of this. Again, the book is Abundance Networks. I hope you'll check it out, and I'll see you later. Peace.